So it's June 17th. It's both the Apposite Day and Saturday. And it's a significant day for us in remembering our teacher, or our teacher's teacher, Luang Por Chah. And Luang Por Chah was born on June 17th in 1918, which would make him 105 years old today if he was alive. And as far as I know, no one in this room met Luang Por Chah. He died in 1992, and in 1982 is when he stopped teaching because he became ill. He had a stroke, or a number of smaller strokes, and couldn't speak so well. And then his physical health started failing from that point on. So we get to remember Luang Por Chah through our teacher, Luang Por Pasno, who lived with him, and other elder teachers who also lived with him. And luckily, before he died, and several years before he died, many talks of his were recorded. So many of you have read some of these talks. And not all of them, but what is said to be like the best of his talks were translated into English, and those are in the collected teachings of Ajahn Chah. And then we have his biography. So a fair amount to go on compared to his teacher, Ajahn Mun, who I think only had one sort of poem of his that was written down, and then a couple of talks that were also written down by a student or two. So yeah, we're very lucky to have been able to have secondhand accounts from our senior elders, but also all of the teachings that were recorded by him. So it's been a very helpful and meaningful legacy that Luang Por Chah has left for us. And the how we live in this monastery, and how we act, how we speak, a lot of it is from the teachings of Luang Por Chah, how he formed his communities, what he thought was important, and what he transmitted to so many of his students. And what's fascinating about his life, and a little bit different, is that even after his death, the group of students that he had continued to grow and multiply, and moved out from Thailand while he was alive a little bit to the west, to England, and then from there to Europe, and the rest of Europe, and the Americas, Australia, New Zealand, on it went. Now there's a monastery in Brazil, and in the far north in Norway. And so it's quite a beautiful legacy that we've had, and so the fact that all of us are sitting in this room is due to Luang Por Chah. So there can be a lot of gratitude towards him and the life he led. So I've been thinking just a bit about recently. Essentially, his teachings come down to one essential thing, and that's what's the most important thing that one can do with a human life. And so Luang Por Chah lived that, and he really tried to understand the Buddha Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, and he put his life on the line for that. And when he had learned what he needed to learn, and I think he was continuing to learn, he then became a teacher to so many students. So one of the things, the aspects I've been reflecting on with Luang Por Chah and also just this recent death that we experienced from one of our neighbors down the street is just that sense of really what's important in life, and just knowing that we're all going to face death, and how do we live life in a beautiful way that doesn't become a sort of depressing thought or a fearful thought. And in fact, I would say that is the main reason I became a monk, was to deal with that very, very question. So we were on alms round today, and we went to Daniel Fry's parents' house, Luke and Emily, who I've gotten to know much better over the last 6 weeks since Daniel passed. And we were over there, and we had a lovely visit with Daniel's mom, Emily, and her mother, Elizabeth, and then Emily's sister, Amy. And when we met with them, it was over in the dining hall to discuss a book that Elizabeth had written with a couple of other women in Thailand. And just to tell you, Elizabeth is 97, I think, 96, 97. And so her memory's mostly intact, long-term memory. And yeah, it's pretty amazing to be around her. And the book that she wrote is called The 10 Lives of the Buddha. So it documents, she was living in Thailand at the time, and she really wanted to do some research around this. So she documented the life stories of that were the last 10 lives of the Buddha. And these are very much brought up in Thai culture and sometimes acted out. And anyway, Elizabeth was there today, and so she talked to us that one day, and then she was there today when Ajahn Cunda and I went over, and we were talking, and she was just asking questions about even though she'd lived in Thailand for 7 years and been around monks for quite a while, and her family, her daughters and sons had spent 7 years in Thailand as well, so they were quite used to seeing monastics, monks. But today she was just sitting there listening to us, and we were talking about Daniel, and she just said out of the blue, while we were talking to Emily, do you contemplate death? And I wish that we had spoken to her right there. It just didn't feel, it wasn't quite coming up to talk about it, but we said, yes, we do. And I pointed to Ajahn Cunda and said that one of Ajahn's tendencies is to have the word maranang on different things that he owns. And maranang is the word for death in Pali. And you can hear that it's related to Mara. Mara is the he's sort of the trickster character in the suttas, and he's always trying to incline human beings toward greed, hatred, and delusion, and tempt them. He's a tempter. Sort of like the one who's encouraging samsara to just keep going around and around for beings to be reborn again and again. And so that question is very important, and it's something that all of us, I think, can really try to use in our lives, like how to contemplate death, how to bring it up for ourselves so that it doesn't, as I said before, it doesn't have a meaning of fear or dread, or if it does, then we work with that. That becomes something that we work with, so that when death comes, whenever that is, and it could be, it could be anybody in this room, just tonight. We just don't know. Surely Daniel wasn't prepared. He had choked on some food and died. He was 40 years old. So that is, I think, something that is so relevant and so helpful to contemplate, because for me, the goal of practice is really to be able to die well, and what that means for me is to not fear death, and to really essentially not only not fear it, but to be absolutely okay with the fact that I'm going to die, that it's not something that's has to be dreary or dreadful, or even negative. One of the beautiful things that Luang Por Chah has said, who is Luang Por Chah's first foreign to Thailand. Luang Por Chah was American, and I think he's 88 now. And he said, even like about 12 years ago, I think he wrote a note. He was on retreat for a year, and he said that he's very much looking forward to his death. And that was quite amazing to hear. What does that mean, to look forward? And he said he's looking forward to the learning experience that it will teach him, because it's not something that he has ever experienced before, or at least that he can remember. When he talks about past lives, he says that he doesn't remember his own past lives, but it doesn't matter to him because they're just memories and they're insubstantial. So in this life, he doesn't have that. He doesn't say he has that experience to call on from his past lives, or at least that's what he had said years ago. But this is the interesting aspect, is like, how could we even think about that for ourselves? To look forward to death as an interesting experience, something that can teach us about our understanding of Dhamma. And so for a lot of us, this can feel uncomfortable. I think the other day we were talking about one of the monastic's family members, and who's dealing with cancer, and it's not looking good. There's no real prognosis around the timing, but immediately I was bringing up to myself, oh yeah, that could be happening right now within my own body. This very body. It's not that just because I'm not feeling it, that it's not already in there. I think a statistic I read once that a cell each 6 seconds, I believe, a cell mutates, and for 99.99% of the time they get killed off or they die. But then a very, very, very small percentage don't, and they either become benign or they end up becoming cancerous. So I was imagining in that moment, just thinking about this monk's family member, just, oh yeah, this can already be inside of me. And how would I face hearing a diagnosis? How would I deal with that right now? Just go to the doctor and say, oh, you have some anomaly in your blood work, let's do some tests, and that's it. Just before we started the puja, we actually had 3 requests for chanting for 3 people who just died. And so I just am bringing this up as a reflection for ourselves, like, how is it that you can imagine contemplating death so that it becomes something that you might someday look forward to in order to better understand the Dhamma, in order to better understand your own suffering? One of the another thing that happened just in that room that when we were today when we were on alms round was that Emily had asked if she could play us a song, and monks, we're not supposed to listen to songs, so I said yes. And it was a song about the memorial that we were at for Daniel. And a woman had wrote it, a family friend had wrote it, and it was just about the memorial and Daniel's life as what was essentially brought up in the memorial as a saintly person, sort of the saint of Redwood Valley. And the refrain in the song was said, in the sky, we all die. And then it ended with life is good. The life is good part was a bit complicated for me because life can be good, but it's not always good. I mean, somebody who ends up being a mass murderer, I mean, life is not good for them or the people that they end up killing. So it's not as simple. I was in Mendocino, town of Mendocino, with Tanyasa and his mom, and we looked into this store, and it was just kind of this gutted out store. It really looked like abandoned, and then my focus went to the door window, and it said, "Life is good," and then Tanyasa said, "Apparently not." And so we have to also balance out that, like, there's good elements of life, there's wholesome things, there's beautiful things, but there's also that which we want to restrain from and that which we want to be careful around, and then the very notion, sometimes when we say life is good, it gets to a fundamental approach that the Buddha really had for us, which is, for most, it's hard to reconcile because of all of the messages we're given. It's just that life's good, creation's good, samsara is good. It's good to be reborn again and again. It's good to experience desire and to have a lot of sensual pleasures and to keep that going as long as we possibly can. Where the Buddha said, no, actually you don't want to be reborn and you want to end that cycle, which for most of us, again, there's that, what does that mean? Death. Right around the corner. So what does it mean? Ending that cycle. And so for some people, encountering Buddhism, it's not, that's not what it's about. I don't want to end the cycle, I just want peace. I just want happiness. And that's, that's okay. Peace and happiness, those are good things. But the Buddha is teaching something radical. He's saying if you really put your life on the line, similar to how he did, similar to how the monks and nuns of his time did, and those also the fourfold assembly, the lay women and men did as well, and have continued to do unto this time, and Ajahn and Luang Por Chah doing the same. And for many of us attempting that similar approach, can we put our life on the line to end rebirth? And so as I say that to you, what does that really bring up for you? Do you want to cover it over, or do you want to go, I don't want to deal with that? Or, well, not for me, not in this lifetime, or I don't even believe in lifetimes. But we're all going to die. And so it makes, it really brings to mind how important things are in our life. What is really important. And so, we can use death in that way to bring us to that sense of knowing, like, we don't know how many days we have left. We're not sure. And it's extremely important to keep recollecting that, because then each moment becomes precious. And we're not so worried about the petty problems that we tend to carry around, or how we want everything to kind of work out the way we want it to work. I was just talking to the monks about, the monastics about chanting, and when the chanting goes well, everyone can hear the chant leader. So the chant leader needs to be loud. And I just kept saying, well, I can't, while we were chanting, I said can't hear the chant leader, not during the puja. Well, I couldn't hear the chant leader during the puja. But it sounded like I was focusing on the chant leader, but I was actually focusing on everybody who's chanting. I was, can we all chant so quietly that we can hear the leader? But I don't think my point was really was heard, and that doesn't matter, because we're all going to die. And chanting, since I've been here in the last 17 years, it's just been dukkha. I remember I was leading chanting as a novice, maybe, and I think Luang Por rang the bell, and he said, start over and raise your pitch. And that's been very difficult for 17 years. And I said, well, I'm chanting as high as I can. He said, well, can you at least get us out of the gutter? And I love Luang Por Pasang. He's just very straightforward. Very straightforward. And he will say it like it is, and there will be memories of that and how important it is. But at the same time, like, for me to wish that there's going to be happiness when the chanting works out, because it never will, it's just how many of those things that do we have in our lives that it's like, if this happens, I'll be happy. If I don't have to live with this person, I'll be happy. If I get to live with this person, I'll be happy. If I don't have to live with myself, I'll be happy. Whatever it is. Go to this place, get this food, fall in love with this person. If my son or daughter behaves, or if they're happy. And on it goes. We just make everything a condition. And so this it's pretty amazing that the Buddha emphasized this recollection so much. some of you know how he asked his monks, this very famous sutta that's spoken about quite a bit, where he asked the monks, how often should you contemplate that you only have this much time left before you die in order to practice the Dhamma, understand the Dhamma. And so the monks are answering, once a day, Lord, and twice a day. And he keeps listening, and then the last two monks say, you should contemplate death, contemplate that you have just this much time left in order to, before you die, to contemplate the Dhamma. And that is like, the first monk said, the time it takes to chew and swallow your food. And the last monk said, the time it takes to take an in-breath or an out-breath. Or he might have said both of those, both an in-breath and out-breath. That's pretty often. I mean, that's a lot. And the Buddha said, yeah, those are the two times. That's how much we should contemplate, that we have that much time left. And that's a very high bar. I mean, you have to actually have enough mindfulness to keep that going. And it's something that's quite. It's an aspiration. Maybe for some, again, others might say, I don't want to think about death that much. But to contemplate that you have that much time left, how precious our lives are is really the key, and what's so important. Because just like Daniel, there just wasn't much time left when he swallowed some food, and then he couldn't breathe anymore. And especially in contemplating Daniel's life, having known him and then hearing so much more about him from so many people he touched. I think there were a few hundred people at his celebration of life memorial. And he touched so many people's lives, and I thought, wow, okay, a life well lived in 40 years. And so, just in asking yourselves about that, have I lived my life well? And it's not a simple answer. It's like saying life is good. But it's something to question ourselves around, like what are our priorities? What's important for us? And only we can answer that for ourselves. But you can see that just in that kind of like surmounting that or trying to understand that actually can bring up a sense of conviction, determination, even joy. Like we can actually think, oh yeah, what's important to me? What can I put forward now? And how have I been making things that aren't important, the important things in my life? How have I been kind of focusing on what's not so helpful? Especially when we engage with like those things that we know get us into trouble, and we keep going in that direction. So that's the tool that death gives us. It's the tool we use death for. That's the way we can bring it into our lives, is to really kind of wake ourselves up and say, right, any moment. Because just speaking from my own experience, it's easy to just put it down and just want to ignore it. And that's when I was thinking about that cancer, like, yeah, that's possibly already inside. It's not like just because I haven't been diagnosed, I don't have it. It's not in there already. Stage 4. So when we live that reality, then those kind of petty problems we have with a friend, or some bickering we have, or whatever it is, it can drop away so easily. And in fact, what arises is then an interest in healing a relationship, in being kind to another person, in being kind to ourselves. we have even more of a stronger conviction towards finding our own peace, finding joy in life, perhaps not beating ourselves over the head with our own aversion towards our thinking or our beliefs in our permanent selves and how wrong those permanent selves are. But it takes a certain amount of courage to do that. Death contemplation is really putting one's life on the line, because if you really start to bring it in and contemplate your own end and understand it, that it can happen at any time, and to think about it in certain ways. One of the ways that we contemplate death is to actually go through death experiences in our own minds. We can imagine our bodies decaying or getting sick. We can imagine our bodies, the parts of our bodies, or as elements, or going through the actual death process. And so it's not a morose kind of fascination, but it's like a very palpable, real experience of how we view our own bodies, how we view our own existence. And so it's not coming from a neuroses or an obsession. It's coming from wisdom and an intention towards understanding. So one of the things about it is it's something we need to remind ourselves with. So as I was talking about with what Ajahn Cunda does, he is when we wash our bowls. Ajahn Cunda was giving a talk about the communist system that we have here in the monastery. We wash our bowls together, which is different than how it's done in almost all other monasteries, where people individually wash their bowls or the bowl of a senior monk. And so we have to identify our spoons and our lids. Whose bowl is this? Whose spoon is that? And one gets quite adept at that. But Ajahn Titapanya's spoon has the word Maranang on it. And several articles of his personal gear, as I mentioned before, is Maranang. So you can bring that up, if you're interested, you can put Maranang all over the place. And it keeps that reminder going, because the tendency through all of this that I'm describing is that it's not somewhere where we tend to want to go. We don't want to actually dwell on that. The tendency is, get me away from that. I don't want to think about that at all. I got at least 30 or 40 years left, maybe. Or I have 20. Or 10, maybe 5. And so we push it away. We literally nope, out of my mind. And we create that barrier around it. We don't let death in. And therefore, when people die, it's shocking, it's terrible, it's horrible, it should never have happened. Especially to good people. Good people shouldn't die, because life's good. And we all die. For me, I just want to say that one of the things that I've experienced in my life around death contemplation is that it doesn't, the seriousness with which I experience death occasionally is when I bring it up at night. For some reason, it doesn't occur during the day. And my own personal experience around it is that every now and again I'll bring it up, and then it will become a complete reality for me, that I'm living in a way that is pretending that I'm not actually going to die. And it is so deeply felt, the knowledge that there is nothing I can do, and that it is absolutely coming. It does strike, a certain amount of fear, and I don't know how else to describe it, but it becomes so real that there's just no ignoring it. And so I find dealing with that at that point is so incredible and instructional and helpful. But just like that can come into the mind, there's also the pushing away that occurs, and it can be almost automatic, so that it kind of disappears very quickly. A distraction can form, or whatever it is. And I lose that very, very strong feeling around the end. So what I found is that's not something to run away from. That's something to really embrace and to work with, because it's not. I don't know how common it is for all of you, but it's something that's I just find is so valuable and helpful when the reality of it is so deeply felt. And so again, this isn't a message to bring up death so you can scare the hell out of yourself. It's a message to bring up death so you can be so acquainted with it and clear with it that it doesn't shake you anymore. Like that earthquake, it doesn't. Or you're not shaken by it. You don't get struck by it in the heart. It doesn't move you. Because there can be complete acceptance of it. And so just imagining what Luang Por Chah said for yourself, to actually imagine the ability to look forward to death, to look forward to the process of dying. Just imagining that you have that capacity to feel the same way. And if it's possible, to do what Luang Por Chah did and just make it very important and put your life on the line. Because ultimately what can happen is a complete letting go. So the attachments fall away. Because this body of ours, this is what we tend to be so incredibly attached to and want to preserve in every way and keep from danger, hold on to. And ultimately that's what keeps us going in samsara. That's what keeps us reborn. Over and over. So these are some words for reflection, and this is a bit of a challenge, encouragement to do something that is difficult to do, but to also try and experiment with it and see if you haven't already been working with death contemplation, that you try to bring it in to your life, thinking about it, and see if it helps, see if it is a wholesome thing to do, and encourages you to live life more deeply and more interested in the Dhamma and understanding, so that you have an intent to end your own dis-ease and your own dukkha.